Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Single best idea is 6-7 minutes. We're trying to keep a short podcast. We know you listen to like 2, 3, 4 podcasts. You have to listen to David Gura and The Big Take, and he's what is it? It's like 28 minutes or 18 minutes, or it's like one of those old time movies with intermission. It's like The Godfather, and you have to have an intermission. You have to have an intermission in the middle of The Big Take. It's so ginormous. We're not doing that. We're doing a podcast, 6 minutes, quick thought. You move on within your day, and we thank you. We're thrilled at the way we're moving up the charts, particularly in business news. Really, really appreciate all the initial interest. But what it's really about are the guests. Today, to pick 2 guests, we could have done like 6 different single best ideas. Paul Donovan is visible out on LinkedIn. He is wonderful at UBS. He's acutely smart, and always with a balanced look at probability and the view out there. But every once in a while, Donovan loses it. Here is Paul Donovan of UBS scathing on the Fed. Let's listen.
The issue, I think, with Powell is first, we're getting very, very superficial analysis. So Powell's saying, inflation is taking longer than expected to get to 2%. That's not really true. Owner's equivalent rents, an obscure price that no one actually pays, is taking longer than expected to get to 2%. Everything else is in disinflation territory. And the real problem, I think, with the Powell Fed generally is there's no philosophy there. There's no medium-term framework in which policy is being done. No, what we're getting is we're data-dependent. Well, firstly, that's backwards-looking. Secondly, that's looking at unreliable real-time data. We know data quality has deteriorated significantly in the last decade. And Powell's saying, no, I'm just looking backwards. I'm not looking forwards. I'm not going to give you a framework in which to think about policy. That's why we've got, in my view, unnecessary volatility in the market.
Paul Donovan of UBS, I want to touch on one thing there that I think is important, and that's the British phrase medium term. Is a general rule in economics in America. There's short term and long term. That's codified within any textbook you want to look at. The British have a holdover from ages ago where they look at short term, medium term, and long term. And you'll get some real close argued discussions of this. I had the clearest memory of a discussion with the laureate of Columbia, Ned Phelps, on this, where he just said, look, we're not going to do medium term, Tom. I'm looking at short term, whether it's Marshallian microeconomics or it's something bigger, broader, Fed policy, the Taylor rule, whatever. That's a huge divide in economics between Paul Donovan out of Oxford over in London looking at short term, medium term, and long term, versus anybody in America that's like medium term. Come on, we're not going to do that. Someone who's not going to do that is Ed Hyman. What a joy to have Mr. Hyman come in and visit with us today in our studios here at 731 Lexington. Ed Hyman invented market economics, and I'm going to go back with a major shout out to Ed Yardeni, and that C.J. Lawrence years ago pretty much invented chart, paragraph, chart. I'll give a shout out to Lachman Akhtan and ECRI, who was doing the same thing, very different economics. But what Ed Hyman did at C.J. Lawrence was not iconic, it codified market economics. He still does that today. In his research note this morning, yes, there was discussion of the BAA spread and discussion of disinflation, like we heard, Fed policy, like what Paul Donovan talked about. But there was also uncertainty of Ed Hyman looking at the X number of recessions he's been through and saying, do I really know what's going on now?
I'm really struggling with this. I don't think it's different this time. It's always different. When you look back at it, I've been through 7 recessions. Everyone has been associated with an inverted yield curve, and there have been no false signals. Hands down, credit spreads win. I do a lot of econometric work. They scream at you. And when they go down, it says things are pretty good. And when they go up, it says things are pretty bad. Yeah. And right now, spreads are tightening up. They're coming down.
Yeah.
And so at the moment, it's beginning to be spring here in the tri-state area, and everything's looking pretty good.
Ed Hyman there on credit spreads. One of the things we try to do is get away from the jargon. I fail at that. To keep the interview going, and we're worried about Lisa Mateo getting enough time or Michael Barr getting, Michael Barr, you should see him. If he loses 30 seconds of airtime, total tantrum. I mean, a complete cow. So, we got to be careful about that. I'm kidding, Eric, I'm kidding. But, the idea here is we can't always translate the jargon. What's a spread? A spread is the relationship of a corporate bond to a full faith and credit government bond, something you can trust, like a treasury, the 10-year treasury note is just one example. So think of it in yield. When the yield comes down, the price goes up and the yield comes down on a corporate bond more than the government dynamic, spreads narrow. The yield of a Colgate-Palmolive bond comes down closer to the full faith and credit. That spreads narrowing. I hope that was somewhat clear. Was that even close, Eric? I went down in flames there, didn't I? Got a C-. Anyways, Ed Hyman and Paul Donovan, single best idea today. We're out on Apple CarPlay. Thank you so much for that. Just amazed at YouTube. I don't know where this YouTube thing's going, but we're building it out each and every day. You go to YouTube, you search Bloomberg Podcasts. I'm shocked at how many people are watching this at home. They're not on their cell phones. They're like watching YouTube at home, which is very, very cool. And thank you to Apple and Apple Podcasts. This is Single Best Idea.